Welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast, the show that invites you to take a seat around the community fire and listen to stories that inspire. I'm your host, Kathy Robinson, author, coach, and founder of Athena Wellness, a company that's dedicated to supporting you on your journey to live more wholeheartedly. Hello, and welcome to episode 47. Thanks so much for joining me. Think back to a time when you were gripped by fear. Perhaps you were afraid of moving forward, or maybe you were afraid of standing still. Perhaps you were afraid of not knowing what to do. Our guest today is an expert in this area. Her name is Jacqueline Wales, and she's a coach, speaker, and author of The Fearless Factor and The Fearless Factor at Work. She coaches her clients to manage fear by encouraging them to stay curious, push boundaries, and break through excuses to achieve results. As you'll soon hear, Jacqueline is candid and outgoing, sharing stories and insights from 35 years of experience. We cover a range of topics, including how fear can be a double-edged sword, the tipping point from fear to action, how to foster radical honesty and boost confidence by listening to your inner voice, and how appreciation creates momentum. We end this episode with our Dose of Inspiration segment, where Jacqueline shares some of the things that are lighting her up these days. And as always, I'll put links to those items and Jacqueline's contact information along with a special offer she has for our listeners in the show notes. And now on to the show. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Jacqueline, welcome to the Athena Wellness Podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure. Please share a bit about who you are and what you do.
So I'm Jacqueline Wales. I'm the author of 3 books, and the last books were The Fearless Factor and The Fearless Factor at Work. And my other book was a novel based in Scotland on the story of 3 generations of women giving birth to children outside of marriage and how it spilled over from generation to generation until one woman gave her child up for adoption. There's a tremendous amount of autobiographical stuff in all of my books, and I'm primarily interested in helping individuals understand how fear functions in their life, how to get beyond it, and how they can really take that next step to develop the life and career that they truly want. And I do that through my coaching, through my teaching, through my masterminds, and various programs that I've evolved online. So there's plenty of opportunities for people to understand how to move beyond where you are now to where you want to go and really take a hard look at what it is that's getting in the way.
That's some much needed work in the world for sure, Jacqueline. When I think of fear, it's really a double-edged sword, isn't it? Like we can be afraid of failure, but we can also be afraid of our own success. And I know you speak about the danger of playing small. And so my question is playing it safe a natural byproduct of living fearfully?
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you're not taking risks, if you're not pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone, and you're living in what you call your comfort zone, but is actually your discomfort zone, then that's the playing safe piece. Now, the last year has been really hard for a lot of people because it has upended their status quo. And what is status quo? But safety. It's like, yeah, we know where everything's at. We know how it works, and we're fine just getting along to get along. But in my book, I like to say, being fearless, be fearless and see where it gets you, because being fearless is not the absence of fear, but it's the courage to take that next step. And, when people say to me, I'm afraid to take the next step, and I say to them, well, I'm not asking you to take the whole staircase. I'm only asking you to take the next step, which is actually a lot easier to handle. But the whole idea of safety is a myth. Our world is upended in an instant, as was evidenced last year globally, not just in a local way. And so I think one has to understand that there's no guarantees. There's no control in life. Control is also a myth. There's certain things we can control, and there's certain things we can't control. So this idea of safety for me is really what's hiding behind that is fear of taking that risk, of taking that next step, of trying new things, of being willing to question your assumptions, question your beliefs. I'm a big one in asking questions, of being curious, staying open and staying curious about other opportunities, other possibilities, finding out a little bit more about who you are and really what you're capable of. And, I've lived a life of risk taking. I've lived a life where fear was very much a big piece of my early part of my life, and probably up until well into my 40s. And certainly I can point to some time in my 50s. I'm now in my 60s. So, there's been several decades of having to, live with and understand fear and get to the other side of it. And to your point that you made earlier about failure and success, I hear all the time people are afraid of failure. Well, what is failure but an expectation, a decision, an option that didn't go the way that you wanted it to go? And that failure is never fatal. It's always, you can recover. Even if you've lost millions of dollars, you can still recover if you have the right attitude. Success is also part of that same coin, if you like. It's the reverse side of it. What if I'm successful? Well, my life will change. Well, yes, it will. So the success piece is about, am I capable? Can I really get what I want? Can I really, live my life out loud and be bold in my choices? Again, fear-based. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm capable. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I can trust myself to do what I need to do. This is the inner dialogue that goes on in most people's heads. So, how do you step away from that? Well, a lot of it is about, reframing your approach, reframing the attitude, reframing the thinking, because the thinking leads to the behaviors. And so you have to start with what's the mindset around this. And whilst all this sounds like, well, easy for you to say, it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes the willingness to challenge yourself, to be self-aware, to notice when you're in a negative state, and know that you have a choice to put yourself into a positive state. But it's resetting those neural patterns in your brain. And frequently we go to default before we actually stop to think about the options that we have to do something else.
Mm. There seems to be a tipping point. You're talking about whether it's fear of success or fear of failure, but there seems to be a tipping point where someone's fear begins to hurt more than the actual fear of change. So what is it that moves people forward into action? Is it a reality check? Can it be a regret? Is it a sense of urgency? What is it that propels people forward?
Usually it's a sense of urgency. Most people will get to change when their backs are against the wall, when they feel like they really run out of options here in order to, avoid or to, kind of bury yourself and deny whatever it is that's going on. When it's staring you right in the face, that's usually when people go, well, I guess I better do something about this. And of course, the circumstances will vary. Let's take a relationship, for instance, a relationship that you put up with for years, and that there were elements of this relationship that made you really, really unhappy. But no, the chances of getting out of it or doing something different, well, there's a roof over your head, there's food on the table, there's, gas in the car, and, I guess I can just kind of put up with it until one day you realize I don't want to put up with it anymore. I am tired of this. I am ready for something else. And so maybe in a fit of pique, you're like, I'm done, I'm out of here. And then, of course, you've got to reestablish the landscape of your life a little bit more again. So, that's one example of where we get pushed to the wall and, finally take action. Because too many times people just make excuses, it's not like that all the time. It's I'm fine. Well, okay, let's scratch the surface of that. How fine are you? Not very, I'm very unhappy. Okay, and we talk about lives of quiet desperation, and this is not new. I think it was uh, Thoreau, I think it was, or Henry James, one of the two, who said that people live lives of quiet desperation, and I think that there's too many people live that way, and I used to too, and so I understand it. So it is about the choices that we're making in life.
Mm. I love that you're speaking from the wisdom gained from, there's a deep understanding there. And I also love this idea of tolerating versus action. And I would think that change management plays a role here to help your clients get from where they are, which is some sense of tolerating, to where they want to be, which is taking action. So can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, the idea of where you want to be. There's a lot of people come to me and they go, "Well, I really don't know what I want." And I go, "Okay, so are you afraid to make a statement about what you want because somehow in the back of your mind you think you won't get it anyway? So why bother asking?" Which is a real problem for a lot of people. Or the other side of that is, "I don't know what I want." Well, let's figure out what you don't want. So, what would that look like on the other side? And the courage, and I talk about courage a lot in my work, the courage to be able to say, "I'm going to paint a picture here that may not be what will actually happen," because the truth of the matter is the universe has got a funny sense of humor, but you have to make a choice. And that's really when you say, "What do I want?" I'm making a choice. And I think I keep coming back to that because it's very important. Carl Jung said, "I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And too many people hang on the past. They hang on their victimhood. They hang on the circumstances that were not always fair in their lives, that were not always working in their favor. And so when you live your life based on, the unhappiness that was created by circumstances or other people in your life, you're missing an extraordinary opportunity to choose who you want to become. And I like to say to people, "What do you want to do in 3 years from now?" And they'll tell me what they want to do. And then I'll say, "Who do you want to be in 3 years from now?" Be. Because you can choose to become whoever you want to become. I mean, I have chosen to become this woman and overcome all the fears of my own life, which have been substantial, and be able to help guide others through this maze of challenges that we all confront as human beings. I mean, my story might be unique. My story might be profound in some ways. I certainly got more than my fair share of stuff to deal with, but I think all of it, I had to take a spiritual approach to this, which is that I was given all of this so that I could learn how to get over it, and I could also learn how to articulate it and help other people. The world or the universe doesn't give you anything you can't handle. But part of the fear thing is the inability to trust yourself that you can handle whatever it is that comes your way.
I love that. And I love this idea of doing versus being. Um, because with any change, even good ones, marriage, birth of a child, endings come first, right? We lose a piece of our identity before we gain that new one because we have to grow into that new one. So, how do you work with your clients through that process? Because I love that point. It's not just taking the action. You have to grow into a new person to be able to take that action on and really embody it.
Well, behind all of that, of course, is confidence. You have to believe that you are capable of achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. And for many, including myself, at a certain point, I didn't truly believe that I could, in fact, create the kind of life that I really wanted. I mean, I was very fortunate at a certain point in my life. I ran into my husband when I was 29 years old. We've been together for almost 42 years now. And uh, when I first met him, he was a man of the world. He had achieved a great deal. And I wondered why he would want to hang out with me. And so I said, on a certain level, he saw me before I saw myself. And I think my insecurities, my lack of self-esteem, my ability to sabotage my life significantly. I was real good at that in the early part of my life. He gave me a bit of stability in order to do that. And yeah, I went to have therapy, and I had all kinds of people who were able to help guide me in the right direction, which of course is my role now. I help people to break through the barriers that are getting in the way. I'm not a psychologist, but I certainly have done enough study of psychology over my lifetime that I feel I'm well qualified to understand what motivates people and what drives behavior. Because here's the deal about a lot of people's fear and insecurities. It got planted there by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10. You didn't put it in your own head. I would say 10 out of 10, actually. And it either came via parents who were supposedly well-meaning, or teachers who were supposedly well-meaning, or some comment from friends or colleagues or a boss that undermined who you were, and you took that as an authority figure who had some kind of inside information on who you were. And that becomes part of your identity. Well, how do you break out of that? That's really my job, is to help you understand that these are stories that you've built into your life. Well, let's hold them up and check them for assumptions. You assume you're not capable. You assume you're not good enough. You assume that, somehow somebody's going to do better than you are. So let's test all that stuff out. And I've frequently asked, how do I get more confident? And I go, it's a building block. It's like you take one step forward, maybe 2 steps back. But, you're still moving forward inch by inch. Like I said earlier, the courage to take the next step is not taking the whole staircase at once. And that's where most people get stuck. They go, that's just too much for me to handle. Okay. So what would it look like if you could tomorrow take a different action? Ever so small, like take a different route home from work, that kind of thinking right there. These are little behavioral things that we can do to start to correct the things that we've been doing on default. It's like the brain's already in default before you even know you're in it. So the primary piece, and you probably know this well, Kathy, is that the primary thing is developing your own self-awareness. And self-awareness only comes out of constantly challenging and being curious and asking yourself the questions, and sometimes the heavy questions, to get honest with yourself, radically honest with yourself. Very important. It's not enough just to tell yourself the stories about how you'd like it to be. Let's get real about how you're actually being at this point in time. And then again to that question, who do you want to be in 3 years from now? You want to be happier? You want to feel more fulfilled? You want to feel more satisfied? You want to feel like you're more capable? Great. Terrific. So what's it going to take to get you from here to there, knowing that it's a journey? It's not a destination. It's just a journey, because the process of change is actually the only thing that we can say for sure. It's there until we die. Change is something that is a daily activity. And if you're serious about personal growth, if you're serious about becoming a different type of person than you may be currently, you got to do the work. You got to show up. And it's not easy. And I say this with great humility. It is not easy. And I know how to cut through the noise in order to get down to what really matters. And that I think is the big question. What really matters.
Yeah, and just going a little further on that, I love the term radical honesty. I think that's just wonderful. And I think it ties into another theme of your work, which is about helping your clients listen to their inner whispers of who they are and what they want and how to live with passion. So can you share some thoughts on that, and also how you help your clients do that? Because it sounds like an easy, small step, and it's, as we know, it's really not. So how do you coach your clients through that?
So I coach my clients by saying very simply, notice. Notice what you're thinking. Challenge what you're thinking. So if your thinking is that, well, you did that stupidly, or what was that all about? That kind of voice that exists in our head. I want you to listen to it. But I also want you to know that you can make a different choice. Again, coming back to that choosing and who you want to become. So you listen to that harsh, judgmental voice, which we all have. We all have the judge in us. So if you can become aware, if you start to notice when that creeps in, and just with compassion, because this is really a big, big piece of this, self-compassion is the gift that we give ourselves. And think about the voice that's speaking to you. Would you talk to a friend like that? The answer is no. Of course not. And that's the response I get all the time. It's like, of course I wouldn't talk. Okay, so why do you want to talk to yourself like that? So when you hear that, when your clarity comes about, like, whoa, there I go again. That's a moment for you to say, I'm going to give myself some self-love here. And when I'm working with my clients, we'll get specific around the issues that they're hearing, and again, it's always going to come down to the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being loved, the fear of being rejected, judged. And then we start to kind of, once you've got an identity around that stuff and you're starting to work with it, then you start to notice more and more other things. One of the examples I use a lot of is I had a client who was absolutely a perfectionist, drove everybody in his life bananas because nothing was ever good enough. Now, perfectionists in general have that quality. Nothing's ever really good enough. Well, what is that never good enough piece? I'm not good enough. So I'm constantly trying to prove myself. And I'm going to put that big weight on other people because I want them to prove themselves to me too. That yes, prove that you love me. Yes, prove that you can do the job. Yes, prove that you can meet my standards, which are really my own insecurities showing up as, we got to get it right. So I had to teach this client how to do things that were good enough. I had to teach him that on the days when he felt like he didn't have enough self-compassion, that next day he could work a little bit harder on it. But he would go to bed at night saying, he did good enough today. That was a huge shift for him because he'd go to bed and start agonizing over all the things that he didn't get done or the things he didn't get right or the ways in which people weren't performing properly. And he drove himself crazy. So, getting him to acknowledge that, to slow down, to notice when he's getting into that state shifted. And it took a few months, but at the end of the day, he was really grateful because he could actually let things lie. He didn't have to have it all done by the end of the day. That was huge.
Yeah, that sounds like a breath right there, right?
Yeah.
You've said in the past that appreciation creates momentum. Can you speak to what that means and, again, how you work with your clients around that?
True appreciation is when you're really seeing people for who they are and what they're contributing to either the workplace or to life in general. Too many times we take things for granted. And I think appreciation and validation are really, really important for all of us, because after all, as human beings, we all want to be seen and heard. We don't want to feel like we're invisible. So when I say, the appreciation piece is important, even in our intimate relationships, being appreciative of my husband and what he does. So this morning he's out there. We've been doing a lot of gardening recently, and he's been taking a lot of great care to make sure they're watered and make sure the plants are healthy. And when he came in the door, I said, you know what, honey, I really appreciate that you are out there every morning making sure the plants are happy and watered, because I'm busy doing other stuff and not paying too much attention. So I'm glad that you are. And I could see the pleasure on his face that, I was noticing something that might have felt like it was kind of minor. So, I give that example as, a recent example, but as I said, we all want to know that somebody notices that we're doing good.
That example actually softened my heart, and I wasn't watering your plants. But to your point, it's a practice, right? And as you said, this is a journey, and it doesn't end. It's not the destination.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, though, that we're talking about fear, and it comes back repeatedly to self-awareness and self-compassion. That's so important that we learn those things. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with the audience before we move on to having our audience learn a little bit more about you through our dose of inspiration segment?
I would just say, that there was a great quote a few years ago that said that the quality of your life is determined by how comfortable you are being uncomfortable. I want to repeat that. The quality of your life is determined by how comfortable you are being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is be uncomfortable taking risks. Be uncomfortable pushing the envelope for yourself. Be uncomfortable asking yourself some serious questions about what matters to you and why you're doing what you're doing. Ask yourself, these questions that really do dive into who am I and what am I truly capable of? Because we're all capable of so much more than we actually think we are. So that idea of pushing the boundaries of where you are now and really making the effort, take a risk. I like to say my acronym for risk is respect your intention and show courage. And that's what taking risks is all about. So take more risks in your life in order to develop a better quality of life for yourself, because at the end of the day, you don't want to go out the door going, I wish I had, you want to go out the door going, yeah, I gave it my best shot. In fact, I've already told my kids that when I die, if you want to put up a stone, you're going to put that on it. She gave it her best shot.
That sounds wonderful. It's a wonderful epitaph. So a few questions for you just to inspire our listeners, not only to get to know you more personally, but perhaps to share some resources with them. So let's start with a favorite wellness practice or a recent wellness win for you.
Wellness practice for me is very, very important. I'm a CrossFit athlete, and I took up CrossFit about nearly 5 years ago. And I knew nothing about it at the time. I also have a black belt in Shotokan karate. So movement has always been really, really important. And challenging myself in movement is also a big piece of my wellness program. So I work out every day or try to, and it's usually a combination of CrossFit or yoga, one of the two. But it keeps my body strong and it keeps my mind healthy. And that's really, really important to me. I'm also mindful of what I'm eating. I very much believer in fresh food. And, I'm not always mindful about my wine consumption at times, but generally speaking, I do take good care of myself. And before COVID, massages were very much a piece for me, and generally honoring when I need treatment. So, for instance, I'm going to see my chiropractor this afternoon, because that's kind of like my once a month tune-up, and make sure that everything's still running properly, and that's important. I happen to have a very strong and healthy body, so I'm really grateful for that. I can't remember the last time I got sick, so that's pretty good.
Excellent. Yeah. Is there a place where you're struggling or you're focusing your wellness efforts?
Struggling. No. I mean, there's always that place, you get to a certain age and you just can't stay skinny any longer. I mean, I have to say, it's like, yeah, it is what it is. I have a strong, healthy body, but I'll never be 126 pounds again. And from that point of view, I'm at a place in my life where I go, yeah, that's okay. As long as I'm strong and healthy, and I got a few more pounds on me, I'm okay with that. But it's taken me a while to be there. I have to admit, I'm very, I can be very vain about how I look.
Well, if you're doing CrossFit, you're in pretty good shape. As a ex-CrossFitter myself, I can appreciate what it is that you're doing and what that means for your overall health. What have you listened to or read lately that you've enjoyed?
Um, what have I listened to lately that I've enjoyed? Well, I listen to a lot of music on Spotify. That's my morning thing when I'm doing my workouts. But reading wise, I'm reading a piece about peer-to-peer coaching, and it's written by a colleague of mine called Leo Bottary, Bottary, and he has amazing things to say about the value of peer-to-peer coaching within small teams. And I'm kind of focused on that right now, simply because the workplace has changed, and we need to know how to get people connected to one another. So I'm very, very curious about that. I read a book on Churchill recently that I really enjoyed. It was about his World War II days. And so, I have very eclectic tastes. They tend to spread out across a lot of different areas. I have a book on my desk right now. It's called To Be Honest, and it's by another colleague called Ron Carucci, and it's to lead with the power of truth, justice, and purpose. And it's quite a powerful book and has some tremendous endorsements from some very serious people. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. I'll put links to all of those in the show notes as well. What new thing or experience are you looking forward to trying?
Traveling.
That seems to be the answer when I ask this question.
My daughter's getting married at the end of August.
Oh, congrats.
San Juan Island to do this marriage ceremony. So I'm really looking forward to those. I'm taking 2 weeks off. Woohoo! And I'm going to go enjoy the Northwest and, kind of go from there. But it should be a lovely time.
Beautiful, beautiful. So when you do have more time and it's not just 2 weeks and you're done, envision your perfect road trip. Where do you go? What do you do?
I would get on a plane and I would start in England to visit my son and granddaughter. That would be stop number one. Then I would probably fly over to or take the train over to Paris, where I lived for 5 years, and spend some time with friends there. And then after that, I would take a plane or train, whatever, to Italy, because Italy is one of my favorite places to go and spend time in. I love the food. I love food anyway. I mean, I love food wherever I go. But I would go to Italy, and I would spend some time with friends in Italy as well. And so, that would be my next big road trip. That's the one that I'm looking forward to probably in 2022.
That sounds great. That sounds great. What has you feeling inspired these days? What's lighting you up?
I think, to be just perfectly honest, I think life in general lights me up at this point. There's so much tragedy in the world at this moment. I live in hope. I'm an optimist by nature. And so I truly believe the best in people. And as far as my life is concerned right now, I feel like I've come out of this pandemic with a lot of gifts that I didn't have previously. I have rebuilt my entire foundation of my business. I've written a book, published a book. I've got new programs online. And I'm now working on a one-woman show, and I'm super excited to see where all of this takes me in the next few years.
That's wonderful. And I think that also covers my last question, which is what has you optimistic about the future? I think you got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in general, I like to say life is cyclical. We have our good times, we have our bad times, and the bad times don't last forever. The good times will come around again. Who knows when? But I'm always have great faith that that's where it will be. And I wish more people could have that sense of that as well, because then I think we're all working towards making this a better place to be in the world. And that's one of my missions. I said many years ago, I'm here to change the world one person at a time. And of course, doing that through my coaching and teaching business. It's been quite a journey. And at this point in my life, I'm just delighted. So the future looks good.
I love that. And what's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
So they can reach me at my website, thefearlessfactoratwork.com. And I have a special offer for your listeners if they're interested. I have an online program, and it's called Reigniting Your Career for Success. And it's kind of an hour-long, in-depth program that allows you to really take a dive into, how you can make some changes in your life. It's pretty significant. And they can get to it by going to my website and under the courses page. So that would be thefearlessfactoratwork.com/courses-2. And they can find that program there. And if they put in the coupon code of JW21, they can have it for free.
Wonderful.
And it's a $37 value. So they can have it for free if they want to go to the website and help themselves.
That sounds wonderful. And again, I'll put all of those links in the notes as well. And Jacqueline, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Really wonderful and such wonderful information for our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure, Kathy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I know there are many ways you can spend your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with me. Until our paths cross again, be kind to yourself and show your warrior spirit some love. If you know anyone who could benefit from today's episode, please pass it on. And many thanks for supporting the show by subscribing and leaving a review. It means a lot, and it helps others find their way to our circle. If you'd like to access the show notes, have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode, or would like a transcript of this episode, visit www.athenawellness.com/podcast. Until next time, be well.